VikesNow, Dustin Baker, the April 20th edition. I have Josh Frey on from VikingsTerritory, who we consider our draft expert. Sir, in the off chance that folks don't know who you are, tell us about yourself, a little biography. And I believe you have like a hybrid fandom with the Saints and the Vikings. We want to understand that.
Yeah, so I definitely probably a little bit more of a unique way to get into this purple team. I definitely grew up a Saints fan, spent a few years down in New Orleans. Every year going to Mardi Gras, I got really good memories of that. And I actually saw Joe Johnson post a job posting on Indeed, went and clicked on it. What the heck? Might as well give it a shot because I definitely want to do something with sports journalism. And he got in touch with me. Told him I was a Saints fan. He wasn't exactly fond of that.
Sounds like him.
yeah. But he brought me on and just getting deeper and deeper into this purple community we got here. It's just really been really cool to get to know some people. And I'm definitely growing fond of this purple team. And yeah, definitely a bit of a hybrid fandom going on. But we'll see which one wins in the end, I guess.
Yeah, I read and then subsequently wrote about how those two teams could play in London this year. That's the rumor anyway.
Yeah.
Yep. And Vikings haven't played in London in 5 years, so we shall see. Before I forget, what's your Twitter name so folks can follow you?
So it is fried chicken, but it's spelled FREYED. And then chicken.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Yep.
Well, like I told the viewers at the onset, you're the draft brain, so to speak. So I want to go draft heavy on this conversation. And I've asked this following question to a couple folks, Wes Johnson, and did I ask Nick Olson? I think so. If indeed Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who has this brand new track record, never been the boss man, now he is the boss man. If he does something goofy or surprising, what do you expect that to be?
So I think there could be a couple of different answers to this question. I think, especially considering we don't know anything about what they like to do in the draft. Like, this is their first time, Kwesi, Kevin O'Connell really getting a chance to go at it. So I think there's a couple different things that they could do here, but reading the tea leaves, I guess, of what this offseason has really been focused on. A lot of people are clamoring for interior offensive line. We need more guards. We need a better center, or we need more cornerbacks. We need somebody other than Cam Dantzler and Patrick Peterson that can be a starting outside corner. But to this point, it seems like they've been rather content with everything that's going on in that part of the field. And their focus has really been on the defensive front. They're doing something completely different from what the Vikings normally do. They're running a 3-4 instead of a 4-3. They bring in Zadarius Smith. They let Michael Pierce go. And I think if Kwesi really wanted to shuffle some things up at that defensive front, you might go to Devontae Wyatt out of Georgia at that position there.
Okay. Yeah, that would. Yeah, I haven't seen that too often. In mock drafts, we do have Adam New, who's from England, who writes on our site. He had them on one of his alternative picks. If it kind of like you're talking about, if they don't do something predictable, that he could be a name. So when you're talking about how they've gone defense throughout the free agency, do you believe that's because Kwesi has identified that as the suspect spot on the depth chart, or do you think he's getting that out of the way so maybe he can draft an offensive playmaker in round 1 or 2?
I think I feel like that's been the easier. If you look at all the positions through free agency, it's definitely been one of the easier positions to fill up, I think, at the front, rather than spending a ton of money on a cornerback or a star wide receiver like some other teams have done. So yeah, I think I hope at least they're getting that out of the way so they can maybe go draft a corner or do something on the offensive line, maybe in a trade back in the first round.
Okay. One thing I was dying to ask you, and I was going to do it in a private message, but I thought I should let the world hear this. So after Sauce Gardner's stock went to the moon after the combine, that happened. And then Stingley Jr. from LSU had a good pro day, and now he'll probably be off the board by 12. Therefore, the Vikings community that you mentioned has pivoted its enthusiasm to Trent McDuffie, and they might be able to get him vis-a-vis trading back. There was some blowback in that same digital community that says this dude is just a slot cornerback and you don't use a first on a slot cornerback. So all of these marvelous college statistics about McDuffie, are they moot because he's a slot corner? And is he indeed just a slot corner?
I would push back on saying he's just a slot corner, because especially like a lot of people are arguing it's because of his size. He's 5'11", he's only 195 pounds. His arms aren't the longest out there. But I mean, you look at some of the better corners in the league, like Jair Alexander in Green Bay. We are very familiar with him with the Vikings, and he's 5'10", 196 pounds. Like, you can get the job done at a smaller size. Granted, he does have longer arms than McDuffie does, which, I mean, that probably holds McDuffie back from being able to be like an all-pro status like Jair Alexander is on a yearly basis. But does that mean he can't be a consistent starter on the outside? I don't think so, because one, he's athletically gifted more than almost any other corner in this draft. He can keep up with any receiver on the field. He runs a 4.44 for his 40. He moves fluidly through his hips laterally. He can go in any direction. So like if he's not losing the receiver on the field, like I don't think the arms are going to be that much of an issue for him. Like maybe if you're going up against like a Devontae Adams who just owns everybody, like you might have some trouble there, but a normal receiver, I don't think he's going to have any issues.
Okay, so if we're chilling on draft night, the Vikings trade back with the Chargers, they get a couple picks down the road or whatever, and the 17th pick is McDuffie. We shouldn't think, oh, son of a bitch, we got a slot corner. That's all he could do. That should not be our mindset.
Absolutely not.
Okay, good, because that's out there, and so we have to, I like to debunk myths, and so we're doing it here today on the show. Here's another one. So I call them these monsters of rock prospects like Kayvon Thibodeau, Trayvon Walker, Kyle Hamilton. Every year during this time of the draft, there's a flirtation that, somebody's going to fall down the board. And the Vikings happen to be in a spot this year that's a little higher than usual. They're at number 12. So it feels like they can be one of those clubs that could snatch one of those fallen angels. Do you actually think one of those three I mentioned will fall to number 12?
So you mentioned Kayvon Thibodeau, Trayvon Walker, Kyle Hamilton.
Yes.
I think the Thibodeau falling thing makes very little sense to me because a lot of it seems to be surrounded like, does he have actual passion for the game and what's his effort like? Well, one, I feel like he was playing in the Pac-12. So in that sort of conference where they're basically bleeding of football talent on a yearly basis, it's easy to get bored. So the effort thing, I'm not going to hold against him too much. And then the passion, like he started with his NIL money this year. He started his own cryptocurrency. He's working with an organization to help children in struggling communities. I don't think this is a dude that you look at him and he screams a guy that doesn't have any passion and he's not going to put effort into things that he wants to do. So I feel like this is probably just the whole draft community just growing bored because he was the number one pick for 3 years at this point. So we're trying to find the new hot thing to pick up on before the draft starts.
And that's the case for the rest too, or the other two. So
the Trayvon Walker thing is kind of the opposite, I think.
Yeah.
I feel like he is definitely like, there's some teams projecting him as a number one pick, like Jacksonville might take him there. I think that's a complete smokescreen. If David Ojabo hadn't gotten hurt at his pro day, I feel like we'd look at these two prospects as very similar rankings going into this draft. I think, like, sure, he could go top 10 based off of his athletic talent, but he is so raw in terms of just being able to be an actual effective pass rusher at this point. Like, number one overall over Hutchinson, Thibodeau makes absolutely no sense to me. Yeah. And then Hamilton, he's another dude where you like to knock him because he might not be as fast or his testing wasn't as good as his pro day. But again, I feel like it's just draft fatigue at this point. So okay, yeah, I wouldn't expect him to be there.
Okay, so that is three of the biggies that are off the board. I did a whole show about a week and a half ago on this mathematics theory that I have. It's pretty straightforward that the more quarterbacks that go off the board, whether a team is reaching or a team is just shitty and needs one, like the Panthers or the Falcons, as a Viking fan or a hybrid guy like your ass, you're going to cheer on your couch because you want these quarterbacks like Malik Willis and Kenny Pickett and any other type of Raiders strange stuff to happen, because then those types of guys will slide down to the Vikings just through the process of elimination. So with that theory in mind, Vikings fans should be pounding their tables on draft night for another team to draft a quarterback, because it makes their life easier. Which quarterback do you predict goes off the board first, and where does he go?
So I feel like this is definitely one of the weaker classes we've seen in a long time. Like if we were putting Mac Jones into this class, let's say, I feel like he'd easily be number one. But I do believe that the Carolina Panthers just can't ride with Sam Darnold going into this year. So I think they're going to take a shot at Malik Willis. Okay. He's definitely the guy that's got the highest ceiling. And like his dual threat ability is just incredible. If there's a B tier to Lamar Jackson's sort of running ability, that's Malik Willis, but his arm is just so inaccurate, and he just makes some really bad decisions with the football at times. And also take into account he was playing at Liberty, so who knows what that sort of means. But yeah, there's a lot of questions, but he definitely has the biggest upside. So I think they take him there.
And then does Pickett go before the Vikings, or does he slide down to maybe the Steelers or Saints?
So right now, I'm kind of slotting the Atlanta Falcons as the best chance for another quarterback to go off the board, but they've got Mariota, and I feel like they're a team that could take Trayvon Walker just because they don't give a damn about how raw he is, because they just want athletic talent. So I think Pickett will probably fall after the Vikings pick. So I think it's only Willis that'll be off the board.
And then what about the other two with Corral and Ritter? Are they fringe first round at the bottom, or do they go all the way to the second?
I feel like at this point, Corral probably goes in the second. I could see Ritter going later in the first if some team, like let's say the Lions at 32, they want to get another quarterback and have him sit behind Jared Goff and just see what he can turn into. I think they could do that, but I think those guys are very late first round into the second.
Okay. And then just out of curiosity, because I'm going to talk to Jordan Reed tonight on the McKinney show on the audio part of this. Where would Kellen Mond stack up with these guys? Would he still be like 4 or 5 out of these guys, or is this really the type of year where Mond would be in a Corral category?
That's a really good question. I feel like at this point, Mond and Corral are pretty comparable, honestly.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Even though we haven't seen a ton of Mond, and the stuff we have seen out of Mond hasn't been great, I feel like he'd be one of those top guys in this class if he was being drafted this year.
Okay. That's cool. One thing we can do, let's say Malik Willis is just like Lamar Jackson, Pickett's just like Tony Romo, like the comp says. If that happens, then we can basically take all of these sentiments about weak or strong draft class and just put them in the garbage. Because we did the 2018 draft as a slam dunk, and then like what was it? Just Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson were the only ones that were worth a damn. I mean, Baker's still decent, but that was supposed to be a really heavy hitting draft class. So I want to point that out for the users. This will be a good litmus test. If these guys come out and with the 2 years from now, we're like, remember when we thought that 2022 class was terrible? Look at them now. Then we'll have to reevaluate, because I remember early on in this draft cycle. So for Vikings territory, I start to make the pivot in December to start looking at the draft, and it's easier when the Vikings are 7 and 8 or whatever they were at the time. And I saw all of the talking points about this being a horrible quarterback draft class. And you flash forward to now, and there's people who are like, it's actually pretty good. And all these 2 guys are going to the top 10. I want to test the efficacy of the hype machine that you're kind of talking about, people getting bored to see how it works out.
Yeah.
All right. So quarterback, you've got Malik Willis to the Panthers, perhaps Pickett to the Falcons, but more realistically after the Vikings. Let's talk about the actual football team, as is the topic of the show in general. Formally for us, sir, predict the Vikings' first selection. I don't care if you want to trade out of it. Which man do the Vikings end up with per your prediction?
So I've gone back and forth on this pretty much all morning. Yeah. I've been, ever since you sent me this topic, I've been just wondering what I'm going to do here. And I do think that despite all the tea leaves that they want to focus on the defensive front and go get Devontae Wyatt, I think that they will end up taking Derek Stingley just because it's going to be really hard to pass up on that guy, especially with Patrick Peterson there, Daniil Hunter, all the LSU connections, and the potential for him to be such a good cornerback. I think you got to go get him.
Well, that prediction is big because it implies that he falls past number 11, which is a coin flip right now, especially even Vegas odds have him slated as over under for draft position is 11 and a half. And it's like, I read that yesterday. I was like, really? Right there, number 12. Okay, cool. And then I guess it's not that big of a mystery that they would take him if he was there. But it's just a matter of whether or not he falls to them, because there's LSU ties all over the Vikings to this guy, whether it's past draftees to Durante Jones. All right, so you're locking in Stingley. I in my first mock, I did that. I think I'm going to do one more next week when we get really hot and heavy right before the event. But I just can't decide because that's what's stopping me is the momentum for him to go in the top 11. I'm like, oh boy. So 3 years ago, I could make this prediction to my friends and nobody would give a shit if I was wrong. But now, I have to have credibility and try to get the thing right.
You got receipts now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So you wait. So I'm like you the whole morning thinking about, all right, I think I'm going to lock in a trade in McDuffie because that makes sense. But then I hear you say it and I'm like, well, what does this son of a bitch know? Maybe I should go with Stingley. So I'm vacillating. I'll get there. All right. My final question, sir. I'm going to try to set this up so it makes sense for everybody. Who is one popular player in this draft class that's either maybe linked to the Vikings or is kind of around that 12th pick that you would grimace if the Vikings pick? Now, I'm not talking about some idiot from the 4th round that, they took like a complete shocker. I'm talking about some guy that would reasonably be there at 12. If the Vikings chose him, you'd be like, oh God, who is that guy?
So the obvious choice for me, the one that stands out right away is again, Trayvon Walker. I wouldn't take him even if he was there at 12.
Ooh,
no, okay. I wouldn't touch him. I wouldn't touch him at all. But there hasn't been a ton of stuff linking him to the Vikings, especially now that he's apparently a top 10 pick. So I think the one that has been linked to the Vikings a few times, I feel like I'd avoid Jordan Davis, especially at 12.
Really? Okay.
Because one, I feel like especially years 1 and 2, he's probably a pure nose tackle type of guy. And if you draft him there, then what's the point of Harrison Phillips?
Yeah.
And plus, if you're drafting defensive line at 12, you might as well just take Devontae Wyatt because I feel like he's a better player. He can do all the things Davis does, and he can hop out to the outside, and he's a better run stopper plus pass rusher. So I'd stay away from Jordan Davis at that spot.
So when you saw the combine stats tail of the tape, were you like, meh? Because that was what made him tantalizing.
It definitely didn't make me go meh, just because I had him before that as a borderline first rounder.
Okay.
And now I think he's top 20. Like if the Vikings were to trade, let's say with the Steelers and move down to 20 and then take him, I'm fine with that. Like that's a great pick. And plus you get more day 2 picks on top of that. Like, sure, why not? But at 12, I wouldn't do it.
Okay. And then this is off script a little bit, but we'll finish up on this question. So I know that you kind of had this hybrid fandom, which means you're not a purple bleeder like the people that are watching this show. So I like to think that makes you have more objective goggles on. So when the Vikings came in with this brand new twosome of leadership, and there was a perfect leverage point to torch the roster and start over, and they did the opposite. Do you look at this and say, oh, that makes sense, they think they can win with these guys and they're going to go contend? Or do you see it and think like, they just don't get it? This is going to be 9-8.
So this is actually really interesting because it hits close to home because the Saints are kind of going through the exact same thing right now without Sean Payton, without Drew Brees. And they're kind of still just hanging in there and trying to see what can happen. But with the Vikings, like with how many things, especially last year, that comically didn't go their way and they still ended up at just around 500, like one game out of the playoffs. And as long as Kirk Cousins is a decent quarterback, like top 10, top 12 type of guy, you got Justin Jefferson, you got Adam Thielen, like the offense isn't going to get much better than it is right now. So you might as well go for it.
Yeah.
If you can secure a few good CBs, you can get a better pass rush, a more consistent pass rush at least. Why not? You might as well go for it.
So if we're hanging out doing this show like October 10th or something, and these sons of bitches are like 4-2, you won't be surprised one bit.
I don't think so. No, I
Okay.
think that's about where I'd expect them to be, honestly. Of course, the draft can change a lot of that, but at this point, yeah, that's where I think they'd be.
That's good to know, because usually in the people that I run with or talk to on Twitter, when I say something to the effect that you said things comically happen to make them lose, when I point that out, they're like, oh, you're making excuses for him. And I'm like, I don't play for the team. I'm telling you that when they have this historical poor stat of allowing points in the final 2 minutes of games, like the working theory is that a reasonable coach should be able to come in and curtail that. And usually I'm blowback like, oh, you're just rewriting history. And it's like, I can't win here. So
I mean, so like it'd be rewriting history if you took away all of those last 2 minute points, but like a touchdown here or there, they're probably 10-7. Like it's not that crazy to take away 1 or 2 touchdowns there.
Yeah, there was it Warren Sharp 2 weeks ago tweeted a stat. It was a weird stat. It said most wins plus losses by less than 7 points. And I think it was the Vikings were like right there with the Bills and the Packers. And there were a couple dudes that were like, oh God, people can't see. I don't want people to see this because, it looks like it's whataboutism, or it's like, we're this close, baby. And just depends on how you construe it, because they played in like a record tying close number of games. 14 of their games were decided by 8 points or less. And that tied the NFL record with like the 2015 Giants or some shit. And then or maybe it was the Ravens and the Giants from the 70s. But of course they had an extra game to do it. But yeah, that wasn't the norm. That's one thing that we forget. And I'll let you go here, is that the first 6 years of Zimmer ball with the Vikings, there weren't a lot of close games. They were usually get up 21-0, and then the Vikings win 21-10. And they weren't blowouts. They never blew anybody out, but they would get up by 2 scores, get boring, go home, and then do it again the following Sunday. Then all of a sudden, when his defense descended to the depths of hell, every game became close. And weird shit happened. And yeah, that's a common misnomer about Vikings football, especially when I got into the community, was that all these games are close and they collapse at the end of games. It's like, well, not really. And then it just started in 2020 and 2021. All these very tight games came to fruition. It's because that the Zimmer defense of old wouldn't stop folks when they used to do it. So
yeah, no, I think you get literally any other team in that spot, that completely goes in a different direction that season.
Yeah. I think the Lions game comes to mind the most, because they were winless, and it was such a I remember watching that final drive thinking like there has to be a way they can figure this out. And then they did the exact type of formation that disallowed them from winning. It's like, defensive coach can't figure this out. It's wild. Yeah. All right, Josh Frye, my man, appreciate you joining us. We'll have you back on frequently. I'm guessing a little bit more than just draft, so we'll get into some of the roster construction stuff as we go through the summer. Any closing arguments, final words for our viewers?
Let's just enjoy the draft this weekend, or next weekend, I guess.
Yeah, hell yeah.
It's gonna be a fun time.
Yep, we are 8 days away. All right, that's all Josh and I got for this Wednesday, and Skol, baby.